let's continue the series of talking about Super Famicom games in this Nihon no Konnyohen Shokai series. It's basically becoming a sub-series to talk about Super Famicom games. But anyway, let's dive right into it. In June 1991, Squaresoft published Sekiken Densetsu Final Fantasy Gaiden in Japan on the Game Boy as a spin-off to the Final Fantasy series. That game came to North America simply as Final Fantasy Adventure, but it did kick off a full series of games that, while originally rooted in Final Fantasy, have since become their own line of games under the Sekiken Densetsu moniker. Unsurprisingly, the sequel to Sekiken Densetsu 1 is Sekiken Densetsu 2, or better known as Secret of Mana here in North America. This game is an August 1993 action RPG developed and published by Squaresoft, who would eventually become half of Square Enix, and that would be the first to have the Of Mana title as it came to North America just 2 months later as Secret of Mana. And pretty much every game in the series after the first one would have blank Of Mana in the title, so that's the naming scheme we got. I'm not at all qualified to talk about this series or Final Fantasy, but every game in the series is of the same general vibe. The world is called Mana, there is a tree, it's all fantasy, but at least the games have since branched out to outside of RPGs over time. For this game specifically, the game was closer to an action RPG rather than a turn-based RPG, which was very popular for the time, but it also included features that were some form of unique, or at least polished, or even new for the time, including the ring command system, flexible co-op, and computer AI sliders, all of which, along with the actual gameplay, were very, very well received. The story, however, is very JRPG, where you play as a boy who needs to stop the Empire from getting all the mana seeds. You are unsuccessful, but at the very least, you do end up defeating them, as well as the mana beast, and then you return to the town where you came from, and you're a hero, and blah, blah, blah. I'm not doing the story any justice, but trust me, I can see why this game was popular, even from a story perspective. So it sounds neat. I'll definitely give it that. There's so much more to go over about this game, but it was at least popular enough to be re-released several times in several different ways, including a 2008 Virtual Console release in all regions on the Wii, a 2013 Wii U Virtual Console release only in Japan, mobile phones starting in 2009, a remake on PC, PS4, and Vita in 2018, and a Switch compilation that released in Japan in 2017 and North America in 2019, which included Sekiken Densetsu 1, Sekiken Densetsu 2, and of course, naturally, Sekiken Densetsu 3, which was released in September 1995, again being developed by Squaresoft and published by Squaresoft, but this time it did not come to North America, with both GameFAQs and Wikipedia saying it got canceled, mostly due to poor North American sales for the second game and needing to compete against the PS1 and Saturn, which is something that a Super Nintendo JRPG was likely not going to do. So despite not selling well in North America, the second game, Secret of Mana, was received quite well, and the game only improved upon all that. This third game improved upon all that with more fleshed out systems and more polished stories. So of the improvements, there are choices for the player character, choices for the corresponding story based on the player character, in addition to the actual story plotline, which has its own 3 branches, and a good time system, which I don't know if any of these things were unique for the time or super, super built upon the second game, but they definitely contributed to the game's acclaim in Japan and were all obvious tropes in future RPGs. The story is different for each character, and I'm not even going to try to explain them, but the setting is roughly the same as Secret of Mana, all still existing within the world of Mana. So if Secret of Mana sounded interesting to you, you'd probably also enjoy this one. Now, how to play this one since it didn't come to North America? Well, similar to the last game, the game got a lot of love, if maybe not as much, but it did get localized on that Switch compilation that I talked about as Trials of Mana. So not only was it included in that compilation, but it also got a full remake ground up on Switch, PS4, and PC in 2020. So overall, pretty cool to add a little bit of RPG history to the collection. But from one JRPG to another, we have title I really like. Lenis Korei Kekai no Kyoku. I don't think I said that fast enough, but it's still a pretty cool name. This is a November 1992 RPG developed by Copia Systems, a studio that doesn't have much, but it does have this game's sequel, and Go-Go Tank, I guess. So while not nearly as grand as Final Fantasy or Mana, the game nonetheless is interesting as an RPG, with the game focusing around a boy who unleashes an evil machine. He unleashes it based on a dare, and your goal is to defeat it. So all the RPG buzzwords are here. The Wikipedia page has all of these. It has traveling through dungeons and towns, the word random, turn-based battles, experience points, party of 4 characters, all of that. However, the nature of the battle system is pretty unique, where so you cast magic from these different elements and combinations of elements, so like you can make new magic attacks by combining elements, but instead of having a set number of times you can use that, kind of like the PP system in Pokemon, every time you use magic, it lowers your HP. So that makes the game immediately more complicated, maybe a little bit more of a management type, but in my opinion, it is at least something that made the game different. As a side note, when I bought all these games, I didn't realize how deep into the RPG mud I would get. Sigh. The game was published by Asmik Ace Entertainment in Japan, but when it came to North America just under a year later in October 1993, it was published by Enix, the other half to the company that would eventually become Square Enix. It was released as Paladin's Quest, which is a overall slightly more concise title, all things considered. Like I said, there was a Japan-only sequel in 1996, but by this time, Lenis wasn't competing against other RPGs, let alone newer systems, so if Trials of Mana couldn't survive, the sequel to this game couldn't survive either. So, kind of sad, but neat that at least it did come to North America. Next up, not really an RPG. You can make the argument maybe it's close, but the next game is one that one of a handful of games that release in North America first and then go to Japan, and that is Metal Marines, releasing in December 1993 here in North America, being developed and published by none other than Namco. The game would also make a stop in Europe in June 1994, finally getting to Japan last in November 1994, so just under a full year later as Militia. Again, almost a full year after its initial North American release. So not only is it a game that came to North America first, it went to Japan last, and that's pretty rare sometimes. So regardless, the game is a real-time strategy game where your goal is to regain territories on Earth in 2117 that were taken over by Zorguef, I don't know, by building machines that both attack and defend. And yeah, that's pretty much all I need to say about it, because it's a fairly popular genre of game, and this game matched that fairly popular genre of game, even for the time. It had isometric/aerial presentations that were maybe a little different from others, but not really all that unique in terms of gameplay. So the game received a PC port in all regions starting in 1994. It still took 2 years for Japan to get that, but it was evidently popular enough to get Wii and Wii U Virtual Console releases in all regions in 2007 on Wii, 2015 on Wii U. But it's kind of interesting because the Japanese versions of those Virtual Console releases came before the North American Virtual Console releases. So that's kind of funny that it took so long for Japan to get all the original versions, but then the Virtual Console ones, Japan jumped on them first. So I don't know. Anyway, for the last game we're going to talk about is a game I'm actually a little excited to talk about, even though I can't say much about the game itself. Basically, when I set up most of these episodes, I just randomize games from a list, and that's how I pick. So when this game popped up, I was like, yes, finally, cool. I am a huge Disney fan, if you don't know by now, and Pinocchio is one of my favorite movies ever. Maybe not top 10, but like in the Disney stratosphere is definitely one of my favorite because I grew up with it. My parents had gotten it for me on VHS. I went to an event not that long ago. I got another very old VHS copy of it. So like, this is kind of cool. The padding is really, really thick for some reason. I don't know. Just wanted to show that. But even though it is a little creepy, it's a little outdated. I have great appreciation for it. And at the very least, it builds character to watch these creepy movies. I don't know. So we have Disney's Pinocchio on Super Famicom. The movie originally released in 1940, and this game was initially released on the Genesis, specifically starting in Europe in 1995. So, Militia was North America first. This is Europe first. Then the Genesis version came to North America in 1996, and that Genesis version never released in Japan. So Europe 95, North America 1996, but never Japan. The same can be said for the Game Boy release in 1996, but this Super Nintendo version was again somehow initially released in Europe. I guess Pinocchio really likes their... Europe really likes their Pinocchio. But the Super Nintendo version released in Europe in November 1996, North American version coming the same month, and the Japanese version came just a few weeks later, right before Christmas, December 1996. So what's with these weird release histories? How is Europe getting this first? I don't know. To add to the weird, the Genesis versions were developed by Virgin Interactive, but published by Sega in Europe and THQ in North America, so not even the same publisher. But the Super Nintendo versions were published by Nintendo in Europe and North America, but was then published by Capcom in Japan. All over the place. Super strange. At the very least, Capcom has published a lot of Disney games over time, so, it kind of makes sense, but, one-off Japanese Capcom game? I don't know. Virgin Interactive did a ton of mid-90s Disney games, including Aladdin, The Jungle Book, Beauty and the Beast, and The Lion King. 3 of those, I'm pretty sure, are on a Disney compilation release on Switch and PS4. I'm pretty sure. But all those games came within a 3-year time period, including this one. So this game is just a puzzle platformer, mostly following the story of Pinocchio, but, that's it. That's a lot of setup for me to talk about a Disney game, but, it's Disney. That's why I'm so excited about it. It's a Disney movie I really like. The game was none of its versions were ever re-released, which isn't really surprising to me due to the differences in popularity from Pinocchio to some of those other movies I just mentioned. But there was apparently supposed to be a Sega 32X version exclusively in North America, and that didn't happen. And that might be one of the most wildest things that I've said, that one was going to go to the Sega 32X of all things, and that it didn't even get that release. I don't know. It was probable enough that it was mentioned, so it's kind of weird. But yeah, genuinely really excited to get Pinocchio. I had the North American version, the Super Nintendo version. I initially bought it with a really bad label, and then I was like, well, I want a better label, so I got a better label, and then got this one, so whatever. Pinocchio, I really like Pinocchio. Just let me cook. So with that said, that's all the games I wanted to talk about in this Super Famicom episode. There are more Super Famicom episodes, don't you worry, but that's it. So I thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something. If there's anything I missed about these games, right, Secret of Mana, Trials of Mana, I don't really know about JRPGs like that. So please school me a little bit. I would love to continue learning about these games as much as I have hopefully taught you something. So with that said, bye.